everyone. Can you hear me? Good morning. I better put my specs on. These are £2.50 specs in Shoppers Paradise in Chapel Market. They're not at all trendy. So welcome to this first session of the day. Now, what we want to do in this session is to get to the truth of what's happening in our schools using first-hand accounts from teachers, education experts and parents from our panel, and also we want to get your experiences from the floor and your questions from the floor. Now, you'll all be aware that there are deep concerns about the safeguarding of children in our schools, mostly as a result of the rapid spread of gender identity ideology. We hear about children being radicalised online with the likes of TikTok and Snapchat. We hear of teaching staff being totally at sea, not knowing where to turn for advice, and because of the total lack of guidance from education authorities. Now, the LGB Alliance, we receive lots of emails from worried parents on exactly this subject. I'm just going to show you a couple of slides. These are genuine questions. Go to the first slide, please. There we go. So this is from a parent, 14-year-old daughter. I mean, this is homophobia in school, getting called a faggot, people saying yuck when she walks past. So it's not cool to be gay or lesbian in schools right now. Much cooler to be trans. And here's a second slide. Again, a mum. The mum saying it's chilling that no one is safeguarding children at schools. They just do not know what to do. So that's going to be the first part of the question, the session. In the second part, we're going to hear from a more worrying scenario for this delusion that children believing that their unhappiness will be cured by changing their gender or their bodies, that this delusion is actually being fostered, even fast-tracked in schools by activist teachers. So Rachel will be on second in the session to tell you about that. So in this session, we're going to try and get across the wide range of experiences in schools. I mean, there really isn't a one-size-fits-all experience. And then I hope at the end of it, to give us some hope, we'll discuss solutions and recommendations. So first up, we have Harry Cooper. Now, Harry started his career in politics, actually, working for the European Parliament, and then as a journalist with Politico website, before retraining as a teacher, hoping to make a positive difference in the world. Now, Harry, I think first thing you wanted to say why you're here, because it does take a lot of courage, especially from anyone under 40, to come and speak. So just tell us, Harry, what made you come here today, please?
I'd first of all just like to say this is not quite as frightening as the first time I taught 32 11-year-olds. So please don't throw any pencils at me. I thought very long and hard about whether to be sat here. Most of my friends do not have the same perspective I have, and I've kind of kept that quiet. And over the summer, I walked 800 kilometers across Spain with my phone off, and one of the questions I had whilst I was walking this thing was whether I should be here. And I concluded that I should be here because I'm very, very, very concerned about children. And if it means losing some friends, and I'm not feeling very courageous right now, and if any friends do see this or know that I'm here, I just want to emphasize that it's about children and what I saw happening in the schools and what I facilitated. So I'm here because I screwed up. And I just wanted to start by saying that.
Oh, that's great. Can we just give Harry a round of applause? Thank you. Really good. It's hard enough speaking in front of 600 people, but when you've got other things at stake, it's a lot harder. So thank you, Harry and Steve, for coming up. So, Harry, I'm going to start by this is a sort of chronological discussion here. When you went to school in the early 2000s, you experienced, as a same-sex attracted young boy, you experienced some bad things happening.
Yeah, I don't think it was particularly unique. I was a pretty dreadful time. I was very lonely. There was no one to talk to. And I'm sure that that's an experience that many people would probably be familiar with. I was also the generation when the internet appeared. So I was 13 or 14 when the internet came online and MSN Messenger appeared, and then other websites. And that was before any of the child safeguarding laws had been passed in 2008. So I was in that gap when I was allowed onto the internet without any regulation. And things happened that informed my understanding of what I then went to see in the schools.
So when it was, it's about 10 years between you leaving school and going to school and being a teacher.
Yes.
And when you were there, I think because of your experiences of being bullied yourself at school, what did you see in the school? I mean, I have to say it was a leafy suburb school. We're not talking centre.
It was a rural school in a not particularly well-off town, so quite a standard state school. I mean, just to be clear, I went into teaching because I wanted to teach history.
Yeah.
I'm just a nerd. I like reading books. And I had it was interesting, the language of being an activist teacher. I had no understanding of myself as an activist teacher. What I encountered when I got to the school was a lot of homophobic bullying, There was one trans-identifying teenager there when I started. There were many more by the time I left, which is part of why I'm here. But I wanted to teach history, but then a lot of the kids, I mean, I didn't come out, it wasn't, my sexuality is profoundly boring, actually. But kids would come to me. Actually, on the safeguarding thing, teachers now have safeguarding training every single year. We are told if there is a child that is not behaving normally or is looking like displaying signs of unhappiness, you report it immediately. So I think the idea that I do believe that I don't believe that teachers are necessarily consciously doing things with malice.
Yeah.
And I stumbled into this because kids were saying that they were being bullied, homophobic bullies, and I spoke to the headmaster and said, we need to do something about it.
So you set up the LGBT plus club at your school to try and, help this bullying situation.
Yeah, so there was a few girls, 12, 13, and I spoke to their parents, spoke to the safeguarding lead at the school. There was nothing, secret about the process. I just said, look, there's a problem with homophobic bullying in this school. And at that point, it was quite normal to have pride clubs or whatever. I've never really been into political activism generally. I did work in politics, but not that bit of political activism. And this is the danger. I projected my own experience onto what these children were going through, and it's not the same.
Yeah.
It's not the same. So I created this group with the parents encouraging me, saying, how about we just have this, my classroom after school, just hang out, we can just chat, whatever. And I said, there will be no rainbow flags. I didn't feel it appropriate to politicize the children. And so that was the context where the group came from. And
you found that when you did set up this club, that really things had changed since you were at school. That was, and basically the trans ideology was very much to the fore when the children were in your clubs. Can you just explain that? It's
interesting when you say trans ideology. I don't think that the kids. First of all, the age profile was very interesting. So most of the kids because I was, dare I say, one of the popular teachers.
You were the cool gay teacher, although you didn't tell them you were gay.
Excruciating thinking about. But there was Moses leading them out the promised land it's just. But yeah, I had a lot of kids came. Like good 25, 30 kids, and they were generally younger, so year 7 to 10, so before GCSE, and they came with pride flags drawn all over them, and I was like, "What's going on? Like, I don't understand what's going on." And they wanted to watch RuPaul's Drag Race. I was like, "Not sure that's appropriate for an 11-year-old," but they were already watching it. So, and then the labels started to jump around.
Yep.
And that was when I started to get very confused. There were lots of lesbian, like young teenagers who were clearly very distressed. And I would say, if you're a teacher now in the state sector, you are confronted by very mentally distressed children. Now, it might be relating to gender, it might be related, it's just, I quit, I had to leave because I'm not strong enough. I wasn't strong enough for it. But there are very distressed children, and they're all looking for belonging. They're looking to understand why they feel the way they feel. And so they're all on, and the other interesting thing, I don't think the headmaster would have been happy about this, but I let them use their phones in the classroom. So I saw the use of the phones, and that was the thing that I think has changed dramatically.
And also you were saying that, they'd come to the school having been on the internet and talking about labels and what their identity is. And so it wasn't really so much the old-fashioned gay, homosexuals, lesbians. It was really about identity and labels, and just talks a bit through that.
I think the big difference between when I was at school and the kids now at the school, when I left school, I would get home and I'd be safe because there was no one to harass me or bully me. Star Trek, 8 p.m. Monday night, the highlight of my week. And now, I watched the kids. You could see them arrive and they'd leave. The first thing they did was get their phones out, taking pictures of themselves, taking pictures of everyone else. And there's that whole ecosystem that has engulfed most of it. I think most people have been engulfed by this, but teenagers especially. And I think the anxiety to me, it's not, I don't know why everyone thinks it's a mystery why this has suddenly happened in the last few years. TikTok and Snapchat, 2016. Yeah. And kids are all on it, all of them. And the labels, so I think they started, especially because the homophobia was going on, and then they'd identify as lesbian or gay, then it would be non-binary. And I'd be like, what's that? I don't understand.
So there was a kind of progression.
Oh, for sure, absolutely. I don't need to see an academic research study on the effect of social media and what this stuff is. I saw it. I saw it happen. The shift from the different labels hopping around and then always ending up with trans. And I would be in this classroom thinking, what on earth is going on? You were a lesbian yesterday, now you're saying you're a gay boy now? I don't get it. How is this happening? And I think this is generally where most of my peer group are, which is, don't really get it. But if it's going to mean that the kid is going to stop slitting their wrists, which I had outside my classroom on several occasions, where there'd be a particular girl, and she would be... she'd brought a knife into school and was cutting herself. And she then said, I'm trans. And I said, is that going to help you stop cutting yourself? And she said, yeah. And then the next day she was, different pronouns, it's just...
So you were also saying when we were talking earlier, Harry, that there's quite a difference between, you were saying that the younger kids who were coming to the club were kind of some of them had mental problems, other ones were quite excited at the idea of having labels and,
yeah, because it's fun.
And you didn't see the harm in it. But then you were saying that some older children, and the girls especially, who said they were trans, would be quite sullen about it and get very aggressive if the wrong pronouns were used.
Terrifying. She'd sit at the back of the classroom. The trans-identifying... So I get confused. I just get confused.
So
this child would be sat at the back of the classroom looking at all of the others in the classroom, openly talking about Tavistock, puberty blockers, hormone replacement therapy. And I was like, huh? What is this? And I've just read the Hannah Barnes book, Time to Think, and I was so not reassured to read it, but I was on the other end of that. I was kind of looking at it at a different point. And they were actively pushing the children, the younger year groups, into thinking about this stuff that they probably wouldn't have been thinking about beforehand. But they all knew about it. I wasn't teaching them any of this stuff.
So just the last thing I want to ask you, because it was an anecdote that you gave, and I think it resonates with, certainly with Rachel and with Steve. In order to try and solve this problem of teachers not knowing, your colleagues not knowing pronouns, not knowing what to do, you decided that it'd be a good idea to bring in, because there was nothing from the government, a facilitator from the LGBTQ plus community. This is the last time I'm going to ask you before we go on to Steve. Yeah. But just tell us a little flavour. So this woman who was LGBT plus, and it was only, you came to talk to the kids, and what happened?
So this was about 6 months in, and I was like, I don't know what is going on. Like, I'm not qualified, I'm not a therapist, I don't like, it's just, I just want to teach the Norman Conquest. Like, I don't know, how have I been, how am I in this situation? So I contacted this local charity, and I said, could you come in and help? And she's like, yes, of course. So she came in, and she stood at the front of the classroom, and she said, are you being attacked? And I thought, what on earth? Like, what? Just came to have a chat. And she said, are they using the right pronouns? Are you feeling supported? Is bullying being taken seriously? And the kids, of course, because they're kids, were like, right, let's really wreck the school. They got whipped up. They were like incredibly angry.
Reinforced.
Yeah, and it was this whole like victim thing. And I was like, I'm not sure we're in the same school, kids. Like, it's not, like, because actually after the group was set up and I like pestered SLT constantly about the homophobic bullying, we got it sorted. The bullying stopped. And then the group, I was like, why? Like, because the group was meant to be a safe space. I can't believe I signed up to this stuff. It was a safe space.
Don't beat yourself up too much, Harry. You're here.
I'm on a stage
you're making amends.
But then the school as a whole should be a safe space. Yeah. That's where I've got to on this.
So that was the solution, really, that...
Deal with bullying of all sorts. Yeah. And
don't have special clubs.
You don't need to have clubs. You don't need to.
Harry, once again, thanks so much for giving your experiences, and we'll have questions at the end from the audience. Now I want to introduce to you Steve Mastin. Steve is an education veteran, although you don't look much like a veteran. 20 years experience in education, first as, again, a history teacher, and now an advisor to the Department of Education and a consultant advising over 600 schools, primary schools and secondary schools in England. So Steve actually introduced Harry to teaching, in fact, trained him. So I just want to ask you, given poor Harry's experiences, do you have any regrets bringing your friend in?
I regret enormously that Harry, such an inspirational teacher, is leaving the teaching profession, but I don't regret training Harry, no.
No, I'm sure he's a
I've seen him teach as well. He is inspirational.
I'm sure. So, Steve, you're here today because you've got deep concerns about the lack of any help or guidance for teachers facing this crisis in schools. Can you just tell us about, why are teachers not getting any advice? Do you understand why this government's so-called guidance hasn't come out yet, and what's the damage it causes, please?
So there's a very good question. Why has the guidance not yet come out? The guidance has been promised since 2018. 2018. There are 23,000 schools in England, so 23,000 head teachers, which means there are 23,000 different approaches to this subject, because there is no clear guidance from the Department for Education. And we're not talking guidance about an issue to do with, say, mobile phones, yes or no in school, or what the school uniform should look like, or things that I really don't mind a school having an individual policy on. I mean, after all, when it was heralded a couple of weeks ago by the Education Secretary that mobile phones would be banned in schools, I remember 20 years ago mobile phones being banned from the secondary school that I worked in by a very feisty Glaswegian head teacher, who you remind me of, Eileen. And she just decided that would be the school policy. Mobile phones, if they were found, would be confiscated and they'd be returned at the end of the week when a parent came to collect them. Suddenly, the mobile phone problem in school was solved. That was 20 years ago. So this heralding of Department for Education guidance about something where it really isn't necessary because schools can make that decision. However, if you are a married head teacher with 3 kids and a dog, and you really don't know much about this subject, you're not gay yourself, and suddenly you have a child who presents as trans, or non-binary, or gender non-conforming, because as Harry illustrated, they have all the language, these children. What do you do as a head teacher? Well, as a head teacher, your first duty is care. So schools are a place of safeguarding. And that is what teachers are very hot on, as Harry illustrated. Teachers don't want to get it wrong. They want to get it right. But sometimes an issue presents itself where head teachers feel so out of their depth. Where is the natural place to look for guidance? Is it not the Department for Education? We're still waiting, Department for Education. Is it going to be another week? It's certainly not going to be in the King's Speech. We know that, and that's coming up soon. So you go to the experts, don't you? You go to Stonewall. They'll happily provide you with resources. And I know there's an audible groan, but if you're a well-meaning head teacher, where do you go? And so suddenly you find the school where perhaps your son or daughter attends has a policy that makes your skin crawl. And you think, why would the school do that? Well, I would imagine that it's not an activist head teacher, it's a head teacher who is out of his or her depth and goes to the experts, the specialists, for advice. And those specialists are very happy to give advice to schools.
I mean, we hear, Harry, that one of the problems Education Department's got, and they're arguing within government, is about the instruction on pronouns, whether teachers should use children's preferred pronouns. But from what I hear from you and Harry, it's almost impossible because the pronouns change from week to week. I mean, what would you want to see the advice in pronouns, and what's the difficulty with getting that bit right?
I don't think that's a question that I can answer because as a teacher, as Harry said, as someone who wants to teach history, I'm qualified to do all sorts of things, but there are some things I'm just not qualified to do. So we will have our own opinions on this subject. And that's why I want opinions and I want guidance from the Department for Education. The Children's Commissioner, Dame Rachel de Souza, spoke out recently, and she's not spoken out on this issue very much. But what she has said is exactly what I said a moment ago, which is 23,000 schools are waiting for guidance. They want clarity. They don't want to make a mistake. Because on an issue of this importance, do you use the child's preferred pronouns or do you not? Well, it depends. If that child arrives in school, secondary school, which is my experience of teaching, on day 1, and that boy is using a girl's pronouns and a girl's name, and that's being supported from home, that's a very brave school that says we're going to defy the parents' wishes. Yeah. But that's a very different scenario from a child who is transitioned in school and then at the end of the day goes home and the parents are unaware that the school is doing that. They're two different scenarios, aren't they? And I don't have an easy solution to that,
no,
and that's why the guidance is so necessary.
Thanks, Steve. I think Harry wanted to say something as well on this. So.
Yeah, I think on that particular issue, I think the thing that has to be constantly returned to is the fact that when a child is expressing this belief, they are incredibly distressed. They are absolutely desperate. The CAMS waiting lists, I mean, they were endless. They'd have to wait for years to see therapists. And so to simply say, we're not using your pronouns, I mean, whatever your ideological position on that, I think, again, of that particular girl who was hacking herself to bits outside my classroom, am I going to use pronouns in that situation? Well, if it's going to stop her doing that, then of course. I think you just have to place it in the context of like the full ecosystem that these kids are in. Yeah,
I think it's incredibly difficult. Last question to you, Steve. The government's announced that it's going to go ahead with the legislation of so-called conversion therapy, including banning conversion therapy for trans people. Do you think that's going to add to the teacher's feeling in school that they have to affirm? Because if they don't affirm, if a child says, I'm trans, they don't use the pronouns and affirm their dead, then teachers could feel that they're going against the law and, conversion therapy because they're not affirming that child as trans. Is that a problem, do you think?
Teachers are a very small c conservative profession. Teachers tend to follow guidance, particularly when it's on a subject with which they're unfamiliar. So, as I said, I'm qualified to teach history, but suddenly an issue presents itself, a situation, a scenario in school, where as a teacher, you feel totally out of your depth. So, counselling someone who's suicidal in that moment in time, you can't pass them on to someone. When I was sitting in Berlin in a hotel on one side of a bathroom door and a lad on the other side of the bathroom door was telling me he wasn't coming out that night 10-pin bowling because he had told his best mate that he was attracted to him and he was now going to kill himself because his best mate had rejected his feelings. I'm not qualified in that situation, and yet as a teacher, my duty of care at that moment in time is for that lad on the other side of the bathroom door. So when it comes to conversion therapy, pronouns, these things, teachers don't want to get it wrong. They really don't. But because the nature of schools differs across England, and you'll hear from Rachel in the next session about a school that's a local authority school, whereas the school that I taught in was an academy. So it was a state school, but it was outside local government control, which meant that that school decided every single policy for itself. But if you're a local authority school, then often these policies are decided by the local authority for all the schools in their authority. So it depends on what the school is. But in my experience, most teachers and most head teachers are not activists. They like to follow the rules, they like to follow the guidance, especially about a subject so sensitive as this one.
Indeed, and I think soon we'll hear from another perspective or another experience from Rachel. Before I get Rachel on the stage, might have a couple of times, if anyone want a particular question to ask Harry or Steve right now, I've only got time for a 2 or 3, there'll be a question session at the end as well. Could you please, the guy at the front, I think was first with the blue. There we go. Ms. Harris, get that. Harris, can you move quicker? Oi, get on with your job.
Please state your name. Do not make a statement, ask a question. Thank you.
Right, my name's Barry, for those of you that don't know. And thank you very much, Bev. I do have a question. Do you feel that what we're seeing is, in fact, a direct result of the absolute failure of the liberal education system since the 1980s?
Could I go first, please?
Yeah, you go first,
Was
Harry.
that quick enough, Bev?
You take that bombshell.
Okay, if we're talking specifically about gender dysphoria and these things, what I think the big thing that's happened in the last 10 years is every child is given a smartphone with a camera, so they're staring at themselves all the time. I'm going to say it, most teenagers are watching hardcore pornography.
Yep.
Stereotypes, gender stereotypes are becoming more rigid, not less. If you're a girl, you're meant to look like Kim Kardashian. If you're a boy, you're meant to look like Andrew Tate. If you've got no chance of either, you're going to just opt out completely. That's what's going on.
Yeah.
Now, what you've said, there is a discussion going on there, and I think there's a much broader debate to take place. But for me, if a child comes to me and says, I hate my body, the question is, why? Mm-hmm. And, I mean, And what I would say is children are immersed in social media, and social media is a lie. It's just a lie. And I as an adult, find it, I don't have a smartphone anymore. I couldn't cope. I was like, I'm done. So I'm an adult when I struggled. Children have got even fewer defences.
Yeah. Great. One more question, I think, and as I said, there'll be questions at the end. All right. Oh, well, we'll just... Yes, please.
I'm Claire from Bayswater. Thank you for providing the teacher insight. It's really interesting for me as a parent who's been referred to social services 3 times by schools. I'd be really interested to know what your interaction with parents was and how you saw parents who may have disagreed with the school's position, even though clearly you were trying to do the right thing. Both of you.
So I think, and let's just try to think. So there's one child whose parent I spoke to a lot. She was trying to deal with the mess. We were trying to deal with it together. So it was a very kind of transparent conversation we were having the whole time. I do, however, you know, the kids that came, I didn't realize what identifying as trans could lead to. I didn't know that social transition could, well, I now know, having read the Time to Think book, it leads to a desire for blockers, all that kind of stuff. So when a kid would say to me, I'm trans, but I've not told my parents, I'd say, don't worry, they'll come around. And I have to put my hand, because I didn't know what it meant.
No.
I didn't know what it meant. So I don't think teachers generally have, as I said before, I think most teachers are trying to do the right thing. Most teachers are just as confused as everyone else about all this stuff. And just, yeah, that's all I can think.